Dateline, Washington. With just 1 day more, before a hearing in the federal district court on a matter in which officials at the White House had refused to respond at all to a request for documents under the Freedom of Information Act. Dateline, Washington. With just 1 day more, before a hearing in the federal district court on a matter in which officials at the White House had refused to respond at all to a request for documents under the Freedom of Information Act, the trending word is a German one, Schadenfraude, with a new study, inspired by the Herman Cain Award, the Republican presidential candidate who had apparently rejected the vaccine, and whose social media accounts had continued to broadcast what had been described as medical misinformation, even after his decease, attributed to COVID-19. The study was published by Matthew Grizzard at Ohio State University, along with his colleagues, Rebecca Fraser and Charles Monge, in the News and Media Journal, which, technically, is not a natural science journal, even if peer-reviewed, but it was the featured article for neuroscience and psychology in Neuroscience News for the Newsweek beginning on July 24, when the deadline had told for the White House to issue a response to the complaint that had only sought to compel the White House to respond to a request for documents pertaining to the classification of basic epidemiological metrics that, even after 3 years of a global public health crisis, remain unknown. But, at the top of the national news this hour, journalists are reporting that this study in the News and Media Journal had found that while very few people celebrated the deaths of persons during the pandemic who had refused to volunteer to get the shot, some individuals, primarily vaccinated individuals, considered anti-vaxxers who contracted COVID-19 deserving of their fate. Even the Washington Post had noted as early as June 2020 that months of discord about the coronavirus epidemic have transformed the cloth mask into a potent political symbol, touted by Democrats as a key part of communal responsibility, labeled by some GOP leaders as a sign of government overreach and as a scarlet letter pinned on the weak. And why should the macabre topic of Schadenfraude and COVID-19 fatal outcomes be any different? Still, some rate Fess.org as reliable and unbiased, relying upon peer-reviewed journals and articles, and they report that, while very few rejoice in the deaths of anti-vaxxers, some people believe those who are dogmatic against vaccines are deserving of worse outcomes, and that reaction is related to the political party affiliation and vaccination status of the person evaluating the anti-vaxxer. Democrats and those who were vaccinated were more likely than Republicans and the unvaccinated to think anti-vaxxers who died got what they deserved, but even 63% of Democrats in the study thought an anti-vaxxer deserved to have a full recovery from the disease, compared to 80% of Republicans. Only 4.6% of people in the study thought an anti-vaxxer who contracted COVID-19 deserved death. The study had recruited a sample that included 932 people designed to match an approximation of the U.S. population in political affiliation and vaccination status, and the participants were shown a series of mock Facebook status updates that mimicked actual posts about a person, identified in the experiment as Terry Adams, with the gender intentionally unspecified, who had refused the vaccine, contracted COVID-19, expressed regrets on the decision and later died. While most began, regardless of party affiliation, expressing positive emotions for the fictional character, Terry, when Terry contracted COVID and became critically ill, differences appeared in how people reacted to Terry, depending on whether he or she regretted not getting the vaccine or doubled down on not taking it. Reportedly, Democrats had less positive evaluations of Terry than Republicans. In addition, vaccinated participants regardless of their political party also had less positive evaluations when Terry doubled down on not getting the vaccine. In the study, the final Facebook post is a tear-jerking announcement from Terry's brother to announce the death from COVID-19, and participants in the study were asked how satisfied they were with Terry's death. And, apparently, Neither Democrats nor Republicans demonstrated what might be described as a high levels of satisfaction about Terry's disease, and hence the buzzword, Schadenfraude, which has been defined as a feelings of pleasure that a person experiences in response to another person's failures or misfortunes. But what if a recruiting firm had exploited your feelings, recruiting over 38,000 to participate in an effort to assist science in bringing a COVID-19 vaccine to the world one day sooner, begging the question first as to why they had begun the study so late in the pandemic, several months after the vaccine products were already in development and just 2 months before the first vaccine products would be released, dominating the market. That is only one question regarding one effort about which many probably heard about in the press, in stories featured in NPR and the Washington Post. And, according to Ryan O'Hare at the Imperial College of London, the Human Challenge Programme is a partnership between Imperial College London, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, hVivo, a leading clinical company with expertise in viral human challenge models, and the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust. And, to be clear, Ryan is not even close to a doctor, nor what one might fairly describe as a scientist, and, by his own admission, saving the private Ryan, he is the media manager for medicine at Imperial College London, and a former health and science journalist with a background in biotechnology and health and science journalism. Ryan considers himself quite lucky enough to work on a huge array of world-leading research projects at Imperial, working closely with research teams to communicate findings and securing top-tier national and international media coverage, and, in previous professional lives, his own words, he has grown dwarf plants in jars, edited clinical documents and written about everything from human embryo editing to the oldest stars in the galaxy. Hence, it may be possible that Ryan very little technical training at all, and clearly is not what might be described as a scholar. Nonetheless, Ryan says that, in the Human Challenge study for COVID-19, the researchers hope that the work will ultimately help to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, mitigate its impact and reduce deaths from COVID-19. And that was his story in October 2020. And, from what Ryan has been approved to publish for the Imperial College of London, the first stage of the project will explore the feasibility of exposing healthy volunteers to the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, which sounds very philanthropic and desirable, while the study would recruit volunteers between the ages of 18 and 30 with no previous history or symptoms of COVID-19, no underlying health conditions and no known adverse risk factors for COVID-19, such as heart disease, diabetes or obesity. To a scientist, this is described as a design, or plan, for the study, and when you fail to plan, you plan to fail, is a popular maxim. So, what Imperial College of London was willing to admit in October 2020 was that they were looking not for anyone in the most vulnerable age cohort, over the age of 65, but rather in the relatively safe infection zone, between 18 and 30 years of age, with the expectation that the patients will, like 80% of those infected in the original outbreak in China, will experience nothing worse than mild pneumonia. But they had been seeking only those persons who had not yet been infected, which the CDC these days would be a difficult task, because they have estimated that as many as 77.5% of Americans had been infected by this novel coronavirus. And this might be a reason why the earlier one starts to get ahead of a rampaging virus, the easier it is to defeat the virus. And here we note, again, that this expression of hopes for researchers was announced in October 2020, 6 months after the pandemic declaration, coming a little too late with too little. Yet, in a plan to acquire information to develop an effective vaccine sooner, at least according to the Imperial College, they do not want to conduct a challenge study on those who have known comorbid conditions, like heart disease, diabetes and obesity, who have suffered the worst outcomes. Was it their hope that a vaccine that would be effective for more healthy people would be just as effective as those who had been the virus's most victims? These are critical questions for persons who are discerning, which one would hope would be a quality of a leader. Or, more intriguingly, were they looking for a particular type of person? Apparently so, because from over 38,000 volunteers, just 36 had been selected to participate in the challenge study, having live, wild virus intranasally inoculated to achieve an infection. According to Ryan, at the Imperial College, working in collaboration with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, HVivo, a leading clinical company with expertise in viral human challenge models, and the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust, in this initial phase, the aim will be to discover the smallest amount of virus it takes to cause a person to develop COVID-19, and to be technical, Ryan informs those receiving his work in public relations, this is known as a virus characterization study. A virus characterization study that was only beginning in October 2020 in England. Had the British just been guessing for 6 months of a lethal pandemic? This does not sound like a success story, and yet, by May 7, 2021, according to the CDC, the infectious dose of SARS-CoV-2 needed to transmit infection has not been established. The Pfizer product would be approved by the FDA in August, and they had begun developing their products in March 2020, and before that time, nobody at Pfizer took the time to perform what Ryan described as a virus characterization study to ascertain the infectious dose of the virus. Describing the plan, albeit late in the game, at the Imperial College, Ryan says that, initially, researchers will assess what amount of virus is needed to cause infection and elicit an immune response by slowly increasing the viral dose to which small groups of volunteers are exposed. This sounds like a logical approach, first determining how much of the virus is required to be transmitted to cause an infection, or infectious dose, one particle at a time, so that nothing is missed. Very thorough, but such was not the plan at the CDC, the FDA, Pfizer or Moderna. But, according to Ryan at the Imperial College, as a result of the study, the proportion of participants becoming infected and the amount of virus that they subsequently shed will be tracked to better understand the course of infection, and, hence, determining what scientists describe, as you know, as immunogenicity, through correlates of protection, in the natural human and the product-induced immune response. This all sounds rather convincingly logical as a process, but again, this does not describe the methodology followed in the United States. Would that alter your Schadenfraude regarding persons who had refused to get the shot? Would that alter your decision had you decided to volunteer, just as readily as the participants in this British challenge study, sponsored by the Imperial College of London? Persons experiencing grief will initially react with denial, turning to anger, which leads to bargaining, depression and finally acceptance, and, as a matter of human psychology, to which all humans tend to be subject, this is an unavoidable psychological process. And some may feel some discomfort regarding one upcoming hearing in the Federal District Court in Washington, and referenced at the beginning of this news broadcast, because it concerns this infectious dose for which the researchers at the Imperial College of London had gone to great extremes to attract over 38,000 volunteers, of whom only 36 had been selected, for the virus characterization study, an attempt, albeit commenced late, to develop a clearer picture of the threat, so as to be able to reasonably calculate prevention and mitigation measures. As of close of business on the day before the scheduled hearing, attorneys from the White House had not yet issued or filed a response to the complaint, entitling the plaintiff to a default judgment on the Freedom of Information Act complaint. What this means is that the White House is now essentially compelled by the court to answer whether the still unknown infectious dose for COVID-19 is classified information. And for those who had volunteered to get the shot, or for those who had refused, would it alter your Schadenfraude, if and when the White House acknowledges that had to own the virus for which the shots had been mandated? Because that is what it means if, as all evidence suggests, the still unknown infectious dose for COVID-19 is classified information. That is the news for now in Washington, and we shall keep you posted on this developing story.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.